A very good morning to all. I welcome you all to day 2 of the 5-day national webinar series on post-colonial literatures, contexts and concerns. It's an honor to introduce the speaker for the day, Dr. Annie Kuriachan, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, Women's Christian College. With over 25 years of teaching experience, she has presented several research papers in English literature and language, conducted workshops, given guest lectures, and audited several classes. She was placed at Silliman University, Philippines, and at Valparaiso University, Indiana, USA, as a United Board for Christian Higher Education in Asia Fellow. She's guided several undergraduate students funded by in their research projects funded by Karadi Path, an English education company, Chennai. She's conducted several academic writing skills workshops for Stella Maris College, Chennai, Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science, Chennai, Lady Doak College, Madurai, Saurashtra College, Madurai, and Nutrition Society of India, Chennai chapter, as well as MES KVM College, Malappuram in Kerala. She's also been conducting several teacher training workshops for school teachers of English in Tamil Nadu on the initiative of SCERT, Tamil Nadu, and also several theatre workshops in Loyola College, Chennai, Vellalar College for Women, Erode, Women's Christian College, Chennai, and St. Xavier's College, Jaipur. She is also the resource person for the webinar series at LTI, Webinar 64, on the topic Theatre in the English Classroom. We are privileged to have you here with us, ma'am. A hearty welcome to you. We are looking forward to listen to your reflections on contemporary Tamil literature in translation from a neo-post-colonial perspective. Over to Dr. Annie Kuriachan, a scholar par excellence, a teacher par excellence, and an action-oriented person known for her meticulous planning and excellent execution. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, we cannot hear your voice, ma'am. Annie, ma'am?
Thank you very much, Ms. Yashoda from Ethiraj. May I begin?
Yes, ma'am.
Problem somewhere. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that gracious introduction. Thank you, Ms. Yashoda, and this organizing team from Ethiraj for inviting me over. Without much ado, I'll move into my talk. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not getting a response, so I don't know whether
Yes,
you're able to hear me.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Good morning, ma'am. Yes, you are audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Oh, I switched on my mic and I don't know what the problem is. Maybe I'll turn off my video. Are you able to? This is about creating a new perspective or a neo-post-colonial perspective. Now, the problems that I would like to look at is this concept of universalism. That is always a problem, and post-colonial writers, post-colonial thinkers have rejected this concept of universalism. What is universalism? From whose point of view? And secondly, I would also like to look at this concept of cultural silence that has crept into the English classroom. So these are the two perspectives that I'm talking about: a rejection of universalism or universal appeal or universal standard by which we tend to mark great literature. So does it mean that anything that is not of a universal standard is inferior? Does that also mean that anything that is regional is inferior? So these are problems that we have to look at, especially in the English studies classroom, and also looking at it from a post-colonial perspective, which is why I would like to refer to it as the new post-colonial perspective, where regional texts, literatures in translation, especially because we're in the English studies, or we are in the Department of English, preoccupied with English literature. Let us also look at how English can be used as a way forward. English as translation can be, as a medium of, as a tool of translation, can be used as a way forward to bring about this rejection of universalism. Now, if the Arnoldian view regarded literature as essentially a disinterested endeavor to learn and propagate the best that is known and thought in
Have we lost the audio or is it just me?
Ma'am, there was some network issue with on your end, ma'am. Now it's clear.
No, I wanted to know if the speaker is speaking because I can't hear anything.
And Tara ma'am, no, like there's some issue with her network. She'll be rejoining shortly, ma'am.
Thank you for confirming.
We request the participants to kindly turn off their videos. Sorry for the inconvenience. The speaker is facing some technical issues. We request you to kindly wait.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay. The problem is once in a while I'll just go off and then I keep going on. I don't know how this is a problem. Okay, so therefore, there is this concept of these four areas that I was talking about: the rejection of universalism, especially of the writings of the Dwem or the dead white European male. Then a foregrounding question of cultural difference. Third is celebrating hybridity and cultural polyvalency, and fourth, locate specificity of literary material in post-colonial context. So this is where the English department and people engaged with English studies have a great service to contribute. From the point of view of also looking at regional literature, getting it translated into English and making it available for those who do not understand, who cannot read, and who are less proficient in the regional languages. So, therefore, there is this question of cultural production where new identities and solidarities can be cast. And that's what I'm thinking of when I'm looking at the new post-colonial perspective to English studies. Reading texts, reading new stories, reading everything from the point of view of cultural polyvalency, where different people, especially in this age of greater trade and greater commerce and greater movement of people, movement of movement of people from one space to the other, it is important that we understand that the hybridization of humanity is also has a great bearing on cultural polyvalency, or the multiplicity of cultures that a human being inhabits and a human being partakes of. Therefore, I suppose this is the reason why how we can avoid this culture of silence, or this terrible silence that greets us in the English classrooms. Therefore, there is a relatability, there is an understanding of one another. There is a concept of there is a huge a wholesomeness of critical scrutiny, and therefore we are avoiding this cultural imperialism, where the greatness and finesse of English literature, language, and culture um, also subsume into the greatness and finesse of native literatures, languages, and cultures. Now, the defining power play of what constituted high literature and culture and low literature and culture would have set in motion the rule of dominion, which is the fundamental principle of imperialism. And at this point, I would like you to look at imperialism as cultural imperialism. Could the culture of silence in the English classrooms be attributed to a latent anger at the Arnoldian proposition that I just mentioned of English literary studies or English literature as an endeavor to learn and propagate the best that is known and taught in the world, thereby disparaging native literatures and cultures? Now, there is also a concept of a lack of experiential learning. Are our students, or are we as consumers of literary texts experiencing a text that is far removed from our culture, from our relationship, from our everyday transactions, or from our everyday negotiations? So therefore, it should be understood that when we look at literary texts, especially contemporary literary texts, regional texts, can they be understood as a social institution? And can we look at agents of this social endeavor or social phenomenon that motivate readers towards agency? And this can happen only when English studies, along with its scrutiny of aesthetics, also incorporates within it its function as a social institution. So when we look at literature as a social institution, and this is moving away from the initial post-colonial agenda of rejection of universalism or reclaiming one's past, as was mentioned by Frantz Fanon, we need to look at literary studies as a social institution. I think we have to bid goodbye to this concept of beating ourselves and talking about post-colonialism as an institution where we only talk back to the colonizers. I think we have to be a little more energized into not just talking back at the colonizers, but talking among ourselves, holding discussions and negotiations and transactions of culture within our own classrooms and within our own circles, where we understand literature as a resituational product within the field of general cultural production. And each mode of such production, we need to understand each mode of production as not a universal culture, but as a particular culture, particular region having its own culture. So therefore, texts as particularized cultural products bring about a celebration of the local culture where stereotypes and misconceptions are rectified. And this is where translation of texts into other languages. I'm not here talking only about translation of regional texts into the English language, but regional texts into other regional languages. So you can have not just Tamil translated into English, but then Tamil translated into Kannada, or Tamil translated into Telugu, or Tamil translated into Malayalam. This can be seen as a service to extend cultural geographies, especially in the English classroom. And when the English classroom is concerned, we have to look primarily at English translation of regional texts into English. Can we bring about this kind of hybridity, a cultural hybridity and a cultural polyvalency, where classroom discussions can be consciously energized by the teacher and by the reader of such texts. There are two examples that I wish to cite at this juncture to reiterate the need for locating Indian literary texts in translation within the contemporary and the regional. The first one, and both these examples are from my own experiences of reading the texts, knowing the text first, and then reading the translation. The first one was Perumal Murugan's Madhuru Bagan. Now, when the controversy erupted, I had no idea about this writer. I had no idea about the text. And I can read Tamil, but then it would take me a long time to read the text. So therefore, what I did was I picked up the translation that was available at that point of time. The translation of Madhuru Bagan as One Part Woman by Anirudhan. I just remember that name. This helped me understand the superficiality of the controversy that erupted in 2014. To most readers, the world within the novel unraveled the everyday world of the lived experiences of the young man and his wife, pitted against fate as they were unable to beget a child. The trauma that they had to go through. And for me as a reader, for me as a consumer of literary texts, the whole problem or the whole idea that Perumal Murugan was bringing to focus was the problem, the trauma that this young couple were pitted against or had to undergo, the social ostracization that they had to go through, the culture that revolved around the childless couple, and the problems that the woman had to face. I did not look at it from the point of view of the controversy, because that was of no focus for me. The greater focus was this. So therefore, that was one of those problems. And it is because of the translation, that translated text, that I was able to understand Perumal Murugan's focus. And after that, I have read every single book of his in translation, enjoying it, enjoying every story that he has had to narrate, and also understanding more than the story. There was a greater insight that I got into the Tamil ethos, the Tamil people, the Tamil thought and ideas, and the rich cultural heritage that the Tamils are world renowned for. So the second example that I would like to look at it is more than the controversy. What gave me a lot of positivity and a lot of energy was the sensitivity and the emotional maturity of the novel, of the novelist who could perceive a world beyond the prescriptive and polarized notions of religion and femininity. So this was the most important part for me after reading this particular novel in translation. And I hope to read this novel in Tamil, the original. Nothing like reading the original, but then for want of time and for want of patience on my part, I would rather read the translation and then understand that the writer's perspective. So this writer who perceived a world beyond the prescriptive and polarized notions of religion and femininity. This is what has captured my heart, and I will never let go of Perumal Murugan's writings. The second example that I would like to bring to you again, all this is from a post-colonial perspective, where the neo-post-colonial perspective is to create an understanding between cultures, to create an understanding between spaces or between multiple cultures that a human being imbibes or a human being lives by, especially in today's world where we call the world a global village, or we call different people coming together. There is more cosmopolitanism than at any point of time. Now, when the world has changed and when spaces are inhabited by different cultures, and when human beings um, are residuals of multiple cultures, when cultural polyvalency is seen as an important part of today's society. I'm not talking only about the urban space, even the rural space. Wherever you go, you have this flow, and especially not just with the flow of people from one to the other, one space to the other, but also because of the penetration of internet. You have so many people looking at different cultures, looking at and understanding different cultures. So therefore, that's what I meant by hybridity of the human being, the human psyche in today's world, and about cultural polyvalency. When these two are there, why do we hold on to the canon and especially the English literature canon, literary canon, and why do we hold it as sacrosanct, as prescriptive of certain norms of culture, certain norms of universalism? um, how does the regional or the particular context in which we live and which we understand and which we are able to relate to, how does it manifest in artifacts and artistic products such as literary texts, and take how do we take charge of it, and how do we understand one another? So it is no longer the neo post-colonial perspective is no longer talking back to and rejecting it, or even resisting, but it is based on this concept of acceptance. It is based on the concept of mutual understanding, mutual brotherhood, or sorority and fraternity of mankind, and a growing together within a particular space. All right, so paying attention to regional literature, paying attention to how English departments and those of us involved in English literature can be of service to bring about this new understanding of a neo post-colonial perspective, where we are no longer, there's no need to resist anymore. There is no need to fight back or talk back, but let us understand one another. Let us understand and accept one another for the richness that we hold within ourselves. So each of us is a cultural palimpsest. Each of us is a textbook with our own ingrained culture, and not just one single culture. We accept and we admit other cultures. So in such a rich cultural context, why do we look at one single culture? Why do we look at unifying monocultural space or monocultural understanding of human beings? The second example that I would like to look at is what happened on the in at the marina in Chennai in 2017, the Jallikatti Protests. All right, so these protests, I viewed it from the comfort of the vehicle that I was traveling in, but I knew the cultural strength and the cultural energy that the young people had, or the young people reverberated along the marina in 2017. So the Jallikatti protest, that is another example that I would like to look at from offering by means of offering a neo post-colonial perspective. Now, viewing these protests as a bystander and not knowing much about the genesis of Jallikatti, and also the reason why Jallikatti is still an important factor in the Tamil psyche and in the Tamil cultural context. I, as an outsider, and so many like me as outsiders, as bystanders, have looked at Jallikatti as a very gory kind of a sport, where human beings are gored to death by bulls. Um, Bulls are wounded or are beaten in order to create some kind of a panic in them, whereby the sport will be made a lot more attractive. So youngsters taming ferocious bulls, so there was this kind of a patronizing prejudice. Now, I offered this concept of Jallikatti as a topic for discussion in the class. And that's when the discourse opened up um, various ways in which the Jallikatti can be seen as a tradition full of pride of one's own culture, pride for safeguarding native breeds of livestock, rather than in accepting the imposition of non-native breeds. So there were a lot of other issues. It's not just literature. It's not just a reaction or a response to literary texts, but it is also a socio-economic kind of a response that I got from the class. And more importantly, the concept of why it needs to be done this way, why there is a need to propagate native breeds, native livestock, rather than look at look at the imposition of something that is non-native. All right, so literature as a mirror to life, it upholds the proposition that the lived experience, or the life that is within the context of the human being, or within the context of the individual, is presented in literary texts. So why do we alienate regionalism? Why do we alienate regional texts? And these were the propositions uh, that were brought forward to the table at WCC in my own department, when when we felt we had to introduce contemporary Tamil literature in translation as a paper, as a course. Now, it's not as though it's only Tamil literature, contemporary Tamil literature, that can be introduced in translation. What I would like to look at is regional literature in translation. There is a paper that we offer, regional literature, Indian literature in translation, but then the specific or the more particular context was what was a lot more interesting for not just all of us in the department, but also among students, because classroom negotiations could be taken up, classroom discussions and discourses could be brought to the forefront, and there would definitely be a paradigm shift from the silent majority becoming the more energized majority and the talking majority. Now, most of us English teachers, we meet with so much of silence in the classroom because the lived context of the readers, the lived context of the students never get any kind of a mediation or never get any kind of an importance in classroom discussions. It is always a text, and it is a text that is culturally alienating, that is culturally far removed, and which is a lot more distanced. So this is the paradigm shift that we wanted to bring in. The silent majority taking up discussions or spearheading discussions in order to make the others, or in order to help others understand and accept the lived culture. So there was a lot there. The paradigm shift was more about a lot of give and take, a give and take of ideas, a give and take of traditions, the culture, the lived culture, the experienced culture, so that one would understand the other in a much better manner. So this is the reason why we looked at, and the objectives that we had in front of us was introducing students, all students. Now, here I do not make an exception to only those who could not read Tamil or cannot understand Tamil, but also Tamil readers, Tamil students who have not really moved beyond the classics, beyond classical literature. So that is where we wanted this paradigm shift. So up to the school level and in the language classes in college, most learners, most students are proficient or are very good with an understanding or a complete comprehension of classical Tamil or classical languages. What about contemporary? So how we've defined contemporary is that which is not classic, that which is this is not clear, but I hope it gets clearer as we go on. So the contemporaneity of literary texts within the regional context, how effective or how much can we relate to these texts? So many of these texts that we've got in our in our syllabus are some of them were written as long back as okay. I am using a 5G connection and I don't know why this is going wrong. So some of them who wrote maybe in the 1940s or 1950s, we still consider them as contemporary because the issues that they brought forward, the issues of domestic violence or the issues of femininity, the issues of social interaction, all that is still relevant even today. So therefore, that is the concept. Yes, thank you, Rimsha. So this is the concept of contemporaneity that we are looking at. Values, ideas, thoughts that are still relevant in the current society. That which was written early on, but which is still relevant today. The other day we had Mr. Jayakantan's daughter, Deepa Lakshmi, talking to us about Agni Pravesham, what her father wrote, and it was a mixed reaction from her when she told us that I wish we could leave this book behind us because modern society has changed. But then when it is there, when people are still reading it, I know for sure that these issues, the problem of violence against women, the problem of um, this particular problem that this young girl faced is not behind us. It is still there. It is still a part of us. That is the concept of contemporaneity that we wanted to bring about in this syllabus. So the wealth of literary output in contemporary Tamil language, which has been translated by established translators into the English language. The second objective was to expose students to various socio-political realities that exist in the state of Tamil Nadu. So this concept of Jallikatti that I was talking about, so it could be looked at as a socio-economic, politico-cultural reality, and how this has become a problem, an issue, or a topic where we can look at the reality that is in existence, the reality that is being that is being imposed and which needs to be resisted. So unless and until a text is translated and a text is understood within its context, how do we look at an understanding that is inclusive, that is not exclusive, but it's absolutely inclusive. Inclusive of the social mores, the traditions, the customs, and the economics and the socio-cultural output of a particular state. So this particular this objective was realized when we introduced Vadivasal. Vadivasal, that is written by wait, let me just yes, that was translated by Kalyanaraman as the arena. Okay, so C.S. Chellappa's Vadivasal, that is translated by Kalyanaraman into the arena. It is quick reading. Within one single hour, you can finish this book, and it also talks about the reality of Jallikatti in that is a part of, and that is the ethos of Tamil culture and Tamil existence, not just in the state of Tamil Nadu, but all over India, all over the world. And I hope this particular novel reaches the world. There should be a world readership. That's what I imagine for contemporary Tamil literature, especially when it is translated into the English language, where we are looking at the inclusion of regionalism as also a way in which post-colonialism can be understood, post-colonialism can be accepted. Well, other regions, yes, other regions also. I'm using Tamil literature only as an example. But then you can look at regional literature that is there within a particular region, within a particular context, and where writers are involved in understanding, in helping one another understand the cultural transactions and the cultural negotiations that happen continuously. And the last objective was to experience. That's what I was talking about, the experiential learning that is sadly missing in our classrooms. To experience the richness of Tamil culture and ethos through Tamil thought present in the writings. So it is an experience of the culture, the ethos, the thought that is present in these writings. So this is the way in which we are going to look at. Now, one problem that I have with this concept of universalism, I'm coming back to where I started off, this concept of universalism. One of those problems that can be identified, especially when we have a post-colonial perspective. The neo-post-colonial perspective is to also understand the imposition of what is seen as being consumed by a larger number of people. Now, when a text is read by a larger number of people, that is also seen as having the best that is ever thought of or spoken about. Now, when that happens, simultaneously, there will be an imposition of what is thought of by many more people. Now, when that happens, what about the minority? What about those people who are not read avidly by many more people? So again, there is this imposition. When I talk about universal imposition, I do not mean a foreign culture or an alien or that which cannot be related being imposed upon us. English literary texts or American literary texts or European literary texts being imposed on us Indians or on us Asians. I'm also looking at, based on that, I'm also looking at the imposition of other languages that are spoken by many more people, other texts that are read by many more people, at the cost of regional literature, at the cost of those texts that are read by very few people. Now, if those texts that are read by very few people also have the potency to narrate tales of lived experiences, and which have a bearing on the particular cultural context. Why can't we make it available for a larger readership? So I'm looking at universalism as also from the point of view of imposition, from the point of view of a forceful negation of that which is seen as small, that which is seen as inferior, that inferior within quotes, and that which is not readily available. So, in the English department, as consumers, as readers of such texts, we would also like to look at regional texts from the point of view of translation into English for a wider readership, where you have the global readership in mind when you're looking at translation. For the simple reason that there is this there is this connection between what you see around you and what you read, the culture that you see around you, and an understanding of that culture by reading these texts. All right, so with that, I conclude my understanding, my thoughts regarding presenting a neo-post-colonial perspective, not from the point of view of resistance, not from the point of view of talking back, not from the point of view or putting up a fight against something. I think we need to move beyond that, and we need to be a little more inclusive. Can we, instead of talking back and instead of resisting and instead of fighting back, can we include the global readership into understanding particularized contexts in the production of literature, in the consumption and production of literature? And that is where local culture can rectify stereotypes and misconceptions and bring about, and that's how local culture or regionalism in text can celebrate the culture that is there, that particular culture that is there. So we can call it as regional texts that are translated into English as texts as particularized cultural products. And that is why I wish to propose this as a new perspective as far as post-colonial reading of texts is concerned. Reading, understanding, and the acceptance of texts are concerned, where it should be seen as a service to extend cultural geographies. If we are not able to do that, extend our cultural geographies, at least can we bring about an understanding and an acceptance of the cultural polyvalency that is there in any given space, at least in the English classrooms. I'll open it up for questions now. Yes, there is a question. How can we exactly bring in experiential learning? I'm sure, thank you for that question. I'm sure when we talk about experiential learning, especially of culture, and when we talk about cultural texts as production or products of particularized culture, cultural contexts, every culture or every region has its own culture, has its own mechanics of particularizing that culture. Now, take for example the festival of Pongal. This festival, Pongal, the harvest festival, well, let's simplify it as the harvest festival, where we celebrate harvest. Okay, in India, if you take the harvest season and the harvest festival, 90% of India celebrates the harvest festival in some form or the other. Any given context, any given cultural context celebrates this harvest festival. We call it by various names. Now, can we look at that? Can we bring about the experiences of celebrating harvest festival in homes, in communities, in villages, even in the urban space. Today we have Pongal being celebrated or harvest festivals being celebrated even in malls. So how different is it and how rich is it looking at these cultural contexts? And is there something that we can take away from one another? We can learn from one another? Is there something that we can accept of one another? There has to be this give and take when we talk about experiential learning. We cannot talk from the point of view of, yes, I am the only repository of all the culture in this particular region. We cannot do that. Now, I, as a Malayali, when I look at Pongal, I have a different understanding of Pongal. Can I bring my experience of celebrating Pongal together in the classroom where Tamilians bring to me their understanding or their logic of celebrating Pongal? So therefore, it becomes a give and take. And at this point, let me also bring to your notice that there is no superiority or inferiority. That's why I've carefully chosen this word acceptance, inclusivity. Can we include our understanding of, say, for example, Pongal, together with the, yes, thank you, Reena. Yes, that becomes a lot more inclusive. So can we bring about the sense of inclusivity where there is no concept of, well, my understanding is superior to yours, or yours is rather inferior, your understanding is inferior. Let us bring about a concept of inclusivity where everybody shares in a greater meaning and developing a greater insight into experiential learning. That is my understanding of experiential learning. And it stems from the fact that we need to understand, we need to respect that every learner comes with the richness of some background or the other, and we do not we cannot look at human beings as devoid of a past or devoid of a background, devoid of a history. So everybody comes into the learning space into the learning space with the richness of their backgrounds, with the richness of their own histories, personal history, social history, cultural history. So can we bring it together and also understand one another better? And I suppose at this point of time, our communities, I'm not just talking about the Indian community, I'm talking about the community of the world community, where we need tolerance, where we need respect, where we need inclusivity, where we need these maybe, maybe old-fashioned ideas, but then it is that old-fashioned world that was much more relatable than the modern world where everybody is polarized. Communities are polarized. Families are polarized. Do we need a polarized kind of an existence, or do we need an inclusive existence? That is a question that I would like to put forth to you when we look at a neo-post-colonial perspective. Are there any more questions?
Ma'am, good afternoon. I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned about universal imposition. So, in
Yes.
what way it blocks or helps, whether it is the people who follow a particular culture or the writers from the culture?
Yeah, it is. That is where I would like to conflate, or I would like to merge the reader and the writer. So the reader brings in his or her own particular context, cultural context. One can't imagine, one can't expect the writer to merge or conflate all the cultures or all the various things. There are writers who do that. But then when a text is brought into class, can we look at it from multiple cultures? Can we look at it from the point of view of multiple perspectives? Or do we still look at it from a very restrictive, unidimensional or mono cultural point of view? Yes, Solomon, you wanted to say something?
Now I'll just read Mr. Solomon's question.
Okay.
How far do you think the TL reader is in a position to understand the SL culture?
Oh, the target language, the target language reader able to understand the
language culture.
Source language culture.
So
yeah, it's a very interesting, especially with regard to translation. We have this problem of SL and TL, target language and source language, which is why we cannot restrict ourselves only to an understanding of the SL, the source language, or the original text. Can the original text be negotiated with regard to the target languages? I'm not talking about a single language, but I'm talking about multiple languages. So various languages, can they bring in, can the richness be subsumed when there is a text where only the original is available? And which is also the reason why we need translated texts.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Actually, I wanted to ask this only, and we have responded. I would like to know, actually, as somebody who could read Tamil, I can understand Madhurubalan, and then I can relate the experience that is present in TL text, that is in translation by Anirudh. But how about people who do not have a cultural understanding?
Yes.
Thank you.
When you live in a space, you also imbibe the cultural values, the cultural ethos. So let us not say that, because I cannot read Tamil, I do not know much about the Tamil culture. I can read, I can listen, I can understand, I can comprehend. So everybody comes in with some understanding of the cultural context of the source language, of the source text. So can we put it together? Can we put our multiple understandings and gain greater richness from these texts? Are there other questions, please?
Ma'am, excuse me. Hello?
Yes.
I couldn't hear what you told during the universal imposition. Can you repeat it, because due to the network issue?
Yeah.
Sorry
when I speak about universal imposition, it is again going back to the concept of universalism, which Edward Said and so many other thinkers, Terry Eagleton, so many of them spoke about. Universalism, their postcolonial reading or postcolonial perspective rests on the pivot of rejecting this universalism. I want to move a step further and offer another point of view where universalism has to be rejected from the point of view of imposition of a larger readership, or those who, the many who have read, as opposed to the few who are involved in texts that are not well known. So therefore, do we need to impose that which is read and consumed by a larger majority at the cost of ignoring and forgetting texts that are read or consumed by a smaller group of people? So that is universalism within a nation. Universalism as from a global perspective, and also from a national perspective, and from a local perspective. So those are the three layers that I'm trying to look at.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for the excellent session, ma'am. Since we are talking about translations, I have a question. Is there
Yes.
politics involved in the translation scene regarding the choice of writers and the texts that get to see the English translation?
Yes, Ari,
Because most
that's a very interesting question. Which part of our life is devoid of politics?
True, ma'am. Very true.
Yeah, every aspect of our life has a political agenda or a political dimension, and I think literature and literary texts should soften the political agenda or a political stake by making it available for everybody. It's not just one person or one community's or one party's ideology or ideas that should be looked at. Multiple perspectives have to be looked at, and I suppose that should be another angle where literature should serve the community. Regional literature also should serve the community.
Yes, ma'am. That remains a wishful thinking. Thank you so much, ma'am.
No, it is not yet. We're not wishful.
Okay.
I'm an optimist. So I feel if you can bring about that kind of a multi or cultural polyvalency in your classroom, that will be further multiplied in the outside community. So can we restore it in our classrooms first and foremost? For me, it has not been a wishful thinking. It's absolutely pragmatic, it's doable, and it is practical. I've experienced that in my classrooms.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Nausheen has put this question, like she's asked this.
Please
Being
read
a
it
part
out.
of the younger demographic, I have often noticed that English is synonymous with progressiveness, whereas regional languages are considered less so. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. So regionalism is very restrictive, very, as you say, you rightly pointed out, it is a lot more restrictive because it is of a particular community. But let me also tell you, those ideas that are proposed by regional writers, if they have human existence at stake, principles of human values and human existence at stake, won't you speak up? Won't you speak up for those human beings who are marginalized, who are oppressed, who are exploited? I'm sure humanity will take over any restrictions, any restrictive thinking. All right, so literature helps us to build those values that propagate humanity. And I'm sure humanity will progress if we allow for those values that uphold us and don't restrict us. So even if it is restrictive, even if it is when you say restrictive, I feel that you're talking about a particular context, a context that need not be relevant. Can we, with our literary acumen, can we project it? Can we use a vision which is all inclusive? Oppression in this particular context is equal to oppression in any context. Exploitation in this or marginalization in this context is equal to marginalization in any context. So I'm looking at transposition, or I'm looking at, rather than imposition, I'm looking at how can we transpose the context that we find in this particular religion onto a larger canvas, onto a larger context.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shehnaz.
Ma'am, before we move on to the formal vote of thanks, I would like to just give you some feedback.
Okay.
What we received via YouTube live streaming.
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, the webinar was nice, as the regional and translated works are not that famous, and it is important to learn about different local regions as it gives us a more clear coverage of post-colonialism of India as a whole. It was interesting to learn about the translation of Tamil works as it inspires us to learn more about other regions too. So most of them have commented on the fact that it has been an excellent session.
Oh, thank you very much. And I must apologize to the organizers, to the Department of English, Yashoda in particular, Ari, and all the people who registered for the webinar for that terrible internet connection. But please, it was not in my control. I just could not manage. I thank God that the rest of the session went off rather peacefully.
Ma'am, you are indeed a dedicated scholar par excellence.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so more about the feedback. It was an informative and interesting session. Dr. Annie is a great personality and an excellent speaker. And then one person has commented that got to know much about inclusiveness and illustrations from the Tamil writings too, from the different perspective. And then the concept of inclusivity and experiential learning was informative. And most of them have felt that your explanations are very clear and understandable. So all in all, I should say it amounts to yours being an excellent session.
Thank you so much. Thank you for reading out these the feedback. I am so humbled and I'm so honored to receive such good feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful session and your dedication to go ahead with the lecture despite the poor connectivity. Your insights on how post-colonialism has moved on from the initial talking back of the colonized to talking to ourselves and understanding and accepting the concept of cultural polyvalence and cultural hybridity are very valuable. And your reflection of Tamil culture seen through the pages of Madhurabagan and the reaction of the Tamil community as a whole towards reinstating Jallikatti brings a surge of pride in us. And as an aside, I would like to point out that we had prescribed Vadivasal, the translation of Vadivasal, as part of our Foundation English paper in the previous syllabus.
Wow.
Thank you, ma'am. So we can actually fully relate to your statement that the contemporaneity of literary texts begin with regional culture, and will definitely take your suggestion of inclusive learning of regional texts and translation as part of English literature syllabus into consideration while we are revising the syllabus. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. And all the best. God bless everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. May I leave now?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Yashoda. See you again.
Okay. Participants, we'll meet in the same Gmeet link tomorrow at 11 sharp. Thank you.